Have you ever looked at a full refrigerator and taken it for granted? Do you remember the stories your parents or grandparents told about a time when a single egg was a luxury and an orange was a rare treasure given only at Christmas? Today, we're going to open the pages of a very special book. It wasn't a storybook, but for millions of British families in the 1940s, it was the most important book in the house. It was the Ration book. Today we explore the daily life of wartime Britain, the struggle for food, the creativity of the kitchen, and how a nation survived on meager supplies without losing its spirit. To understand why this happened, we have to go back to the start of the Second World War. Before 1939, Great Britain imported about 60% of its food from overseas. Enormous cargo ships brought meat from Argentina, cheese from New Zealand, and sugar from the Caribbean. But when war was declared in September 1939, everything changed. The German Navy deployed U-boats to patrol the Atlantic Ocean, sinking merchant ships and trying to starve the United Kingdom into submission. The government knew that if they didn't control the food supply, the poor would starve, while the rich hoarded everything. So, on January 8, 1940, the Ministry of Food introduced rationing. It started with bacon, butter, and sugar, but soon it covered almost everything. Imagine the scene in a typical British kitchen. The housewife was the general of the home front. She had to register with specific local shops. You couldn't just walk into any supermarket. You were tied to your local grocer, butcher, and milkman. The relationship you had with your shopkeeper was vital. If you were polite and patient, he might slip an extra sausage into your bag or save you a tin of peaches from under the counter. But for most, the allowances were incredibly small. Let's look at the numbers because they are shocking to us today. For one adult, for an entire week, the ration was roughly this: 4 ounces of margarine, 2 ounces of butter, and perhaps 3 or 4 ounces of cheese. You were allowed just 8 ounces of sugar and 2 ounces of tea. Meat was rationed by price, not weight, meaning if you bought a good steak, that was your whole week's allowance gone. If you bought cheaper cuts, you got a bit more. And eggs? You were lucky to get 1 fresh egg a week. Often families had to rely on dried powdered egg, which came in a tin from America. It could be made into scrambled eggs or used for baking, but people often complained about the rubbery texture and the strange taste. But the British people did not complain. They got creative. This was the era of make do and mend and dig for victory. The government launched massive campaigns to encourage people to grow their own food. Public parks, sports fields, and even the lawns of historic estates were dug up and turned into vegetable allotments. If you had a backyard, you didn't grow flowers. You grew cabbages, potatoes, and carrots. Many families kept chickens for eggs or rabbits for meat right there in the garden. It was a time when the entire neighborhood smelled of boiling vegetables. The Ministry of Food, led by Lord Woolton, tried to make the best of it. They introduced the National Loaf, a gray wholemeal bread that was healthier than white bread but very chewy. They promoted recipes that used vegetables to bulk out meals. Have you ever heard of Woolton pie? It was a dish made entirely of vegetables like potatoes, cauliflower, and carrots, covered in a pastry crust or mashed potato. There was no meat in it, but it filled empty stomachs. People made mock apricot tarts using turnips and carrot jam instead of fruit. It sounds strange to us, but hunger is a powerful chef. It wasn't just basic food that was controlled. In December 1941, the points system was introduced. Every person had a certain number of points in their ration book to spend on luxury items like tinned fruit, biscuits, or condensed milk. You had to make difficult choices. Did you want a tin of salmon for a special birthday? Or did you want dried peas to last the week? The queue became a way of life. If you saw a line of people forming outside a shop, you joined it immediately, even if you didn't know what they were selling. It might be onions, or it might be a fresh delivery of fish, which wasn't rationed, but it was very hard to catch, because the fishing boats were at risk of hitting sea mines. Children grew up not knowing what a banana or a pineapple looked like. There is a famous story of a child seeing a banana for the first time after the war and trying to eat it with the skin on, because they had no idea what it was. Sweets and chocolates were rationed too. Kids would save their coupons for weeks just to buy a small bag of toffees. It wasn't just food either. Clothes were rationed starting in June 1941. The government introduced the CC-41 logo, which stood for Civilian Clothing 1941. These clothes were made with less fabric to save material for military uniforms. Pockets were removed, pleats were banned, and skirts became shorter. Women would draw lines down the back of their legs with an eyebrow pencil to look like they were wearing nylon stockings, which were impossible to find. Curtains were cut down to make wedding dresses, and old men's suits were tailored into coats for children. Nothing was thrown away. Despite the hardship, there was a strange silver lining. Because the government carefully calculated the vitamins and calories everyone needed, the British population was actually healthier during the war than before it. The diet was low in sugar and fat and high in fiber and vegetables. Infant mortality rates dropped, and people were leaner and fitter. It was a system based on fairness. The king and queen had ration books just like the factory worker in the East End. This shared struggle created a deep sense of unity. However, we must be honest about history. It wasn't all perfect. There was a black market. Spivs, as they were called, men in flashy suits standing on street corners, would sell stolen goods at high prices. If you had enough money, you could buy extra petrol, nylon stockings, or fresh turkeys. But for the vast majority of honest people, the black market was something to be despised. They took pride in managing within the law. Perhaps the most surprising fact for the younger generation is when rationing ended. We assume it stopped when the war ended in 1945, but that is not true. In fact, things got worse before they got better. Because Britain was bankrupt after the war and needed to feed the starving populations of liberated Europe, bread was rationed in 1946, something that never even happened during the height of the Blitz. It took years for life to return to normal. Tea rationing didn't end until 1952. Sweets were finally taken off the ration in 1953, leading to children emptying sweet shops in a single day. And meat? Meat was the last to be de-rationed in July 1954, 9 years after the war had ended. So why do we tell this story? It isn't just about food. It is a story about the resilience of the human spirit. It is about how families sat around a table, sharing a small loaf of bread, and feeling grateful simply to be alive and together. It reminds us of a time when we wasted nothing and valued everything. Thank you so much for listening to this history of wartime kitchen and courage. We are very curious to know your thoughts. Do you have family members who lived through this time? Have you ever tried a wartime recipe like the Woolton pie? Please leave a comment below and share your family's history with us. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this video and want to support our channel, please click the like button. It makes a huge difference. And please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so we can continue to bring you these fascinating stories from the past. Until next time, take care.